Ministering Angels by Lori A. Thompson. Chapter 2. The Hunt. Joshua's head breaks through the still blue ocean. Draped around his neck, he has 2 jugs of water made of animal stomach lining. He walks toward the island, and his drenched skin meets the crisp morning air. He looks up to the clear blue sky and takes some deep breaths. In the distance, he sees Andrew sitting on the shore waiting his turn. Joshua looks to the island and imagines a successful kill for the hunters. The hunters have been out since the crack of dawn. When the season changes, the animals will burrow deep into the mountain. The boys have not discovered a successful hunting strategy to capture the animals once they have gone underground. Joe feels the pressure and has committed to return to the cave with meat today. The hunters have broken up into 2 groups. 3 of the boys will hunt for wild boar, and the other 2 will focus on rabbit. The boys joke about the legend of a boar nicknamed Speedy. Only Joe has seen it, and many boys joke that it doesn't really exist. Twice before, Joe claimed he had it in his sight and directed the boys to circle to the right and left. Their goal was to usher the boar into a hole dug 6 feet in the ground. A net made of vines covered the top, which would easily release and fall into the hole with the animal. The boys circled and made noises as they gathered at the hole. There was no boar. Joe reacted the same way each time he had to face disappointment. The shock quickly turned to anger when he saw the doubt on the hunters' faces. Joe has been known to throw fits when he returns to the cave empty-handed. His anger often overflows, ultimately affecting the whole group. The boys often challenge each other. When the fire burns down to coals, they see who can make it across the coals barefoot. One time at dinner fire, Joe was so worked up he kept walking over the fire wearing only a deer-skinned wrap around his waist. Joe didn't wait until the fire burned down. The wood and flames hit knee-high. Each step he took, flaming logs shifted, sparks flew, and Joe fought to keep his balance. The last few steps he jumped out of the fire, threw his hands up, and beat his chest. A quick spin around, he crouched down, arched his back, and challenged anyone to do the same. Then he walked back through the fire again and again. Joe grabbed boys from the crowd and pushed them towards the fire. He turned and caught Nathan's attention. Throughout dinner, Joshua kept an eye on Joe. The hunters made a failed attempt at bringing back game for the group that day. Joe was raw. Joshua watched Joe move through the crowd. He matched Joe's fixation. Now both their sights were on Nathan. Nathan was sitting on the ground, surrounded by his regular crew, playing the stick game. Nathan could feel Joe's intensity and leaned back with a look of apprehension. Joshua tossed aside his beef, spit out bones, and stood with intent to face Joe. Joe stood before Nathan and called out, "Hey Nathan, stand and show yourself. You're safe behind Brad. If we have to listen to you, then stand and speak for yourself. Come on, here's the fire, and the group is here. Tell us, what are you feeling today, Nathan?" Josh appeared just to the side of Joe. Josh had thrust his chest against Joe's shoulder. Joe's body remained rigid, his eyes focused on Nathan. Joshua pressed his face into Joe's ear and stated with control, "Enough, you are done." Joe shifted his body to confront Josh face to face. Joe rarely gets confronted, but he's not shocked when Joshua steps up. No one in the hunting crew challenges Joe's authority. The crew has hunted together for a long time. They've learned to trust their varying personalities to make it back safe, accompanied with a healthy offering. It was one of the first times Joshua had to protect Nathan, but it wasn't going to be the last. The hunt continues with Joe remembering the picture Nathan drew and leads the boys toward the waterfall. Even though Joe had taunted Nathan before, he fears the mystical enough to obey the signs. The water boys, Joshua and Andrew, are still enjoying the day gathering water. Andrew is swimming out towards the deep. Andrew likes his job because he gets to spend time with Joshua. Brad has sat with Andrew on more than one occasion to discuss his work and to consider alternative options around the island. Brad worries about Andrew being so deep in the water by himself. Brad didn't tell Andrew, but Nathan has warned Brad to reassign Andrew. During one of the preparation fires, Nathan drew a boy drowning in the water. The dots Nathan drew on the stick figure led Nathan to believe it was Andrew. Since Nathan gave no urgency of time, Brad respected Andrew's decision to stay as one of the water boys. Andrew continues to swim until he sees the dark shadow in the water. The light blue ocean turns a dark gray as he gets closer. He breathes in and dives into the mystic vision. What seemed so deep and far away when they first started gathering water for the group is now quick and easy. The darkness has long been a fear for the boys of the island. The warm season would lure the boys to the shore to explore the vast ocean. In the early years, they spent the days swimming, diving, and gathering food deep and far into the water. There were stories of a hole in the ocean that actually sucked in water. Plenty of rumors floated around the cave after Malachi's incident. It was his incident that keeps most of the boys away from the deep. Malachi uses a crutch on his left side to make up for his missing leg. Much time has passed since the incident, but he still can't remember most of it. He remembers the day was clear and calm, and that he was with Joshua and Andrew. They were following the directions laid out by Nathan. The view placed the large rock center just below the setting sun. What they disregarded was the rippling in the water. Malachi responded with excitement when he saw the shadow from a distance and swam towards it. He had left the others behind. The farther they swam out into the deep, the rougher the water had become. Joshua looked at the clear blue sky filled with light and then panned the ocean for a sign. He sought reasoning to explain what he saw. The water divided into a section that rippled like a river. The further he looked into the ocean, the more intense the rapids had become. It moved across the length of the horizon. There was no sign of any sort of storm on the map. Joshua started yelling ahead at Malachi to return. The sound of Joshua's voice startled Andrew. He stopped swimming. While he treaded water, he saw Joshua's calm, controlled demeanor turn to panic as Malachi dove down into the darkness. Joshua had spent hours diving and playing in the water, hunting and searching, in what he considered the great unknown. The fear Joshua felt was more out of respect for Mother Nature and what she's capable of. One glance at Joshua and Andrew knew they needed to get back to shore. Brad took control of the situation immediately. Time seemed to stand still as the hours went by with no sight of Malachi. It wasn't until later in the evening, when Aiden went to feed his animals, that hope returned to the group. Aiden dropped his 2 buckets of fish when he saw a body in the water. A head rested on the top edge of his underwater cage. It was in the days that passed that unveiled a permanent shift in the group. As appointed water boys, Joshua and Andrew were the only boys allowed to swim out to the deep, dark part of the ocean, but only to collect water. It was a rule no one had interest in breaking. Brad identified the rolling water as a storm that indicated the change of the season. In the seasons that followed, the water boys collected the island's water supply until they sighted ripples. During the last couple seasons, Brad noticed the ripples came earlier and earlier. Brad was counting on an early season again, so food and water was gathered and stored in a shorter period of time. This meant the boys had to be kept focused and productive more of the time. This was a challenge that Brad did not take on alone. Within each group, Brad appointed leaders. All of the leaders gathered before the preparation fire to review their goals and mark their achievements. Brad presented lists of current and needed supplies on thin layers of bark. It was clear that this hunt was an important one. The hunters' anticipation of a good kill grew as they approached the waterfall. Joe suddenly motioned to the hunters to stop. A deep snarling noise rolled through the trees. Through Joe's smile, the boys are all hoping for Speedy. Kenny licked his chops. Kenny is an intense hunter. His hair is big and unkempt. His war paint takes days to prepare. This week, he has an intricate snake that starts at his wrist and winds up over his shoulder and around his neck. Kenny gathers ink, producing plants for David's artwork. In return, David paints tattoos on Kenny for hunting inspiration. David's nickname is Da Vinci because he covers everything he touches with drawings and paintings. The boys follow Joe's bodily gestures and clicks of the tongue to get into position. Joe looks down a pair of trees that trail off into a deep, dark section of forest. Kenny set bait down just between the trees to draw the animal out into the light. Joe motions to one of the boys to station himself up the taller of the two trees. The hunter scampers up quickly, but still there is no sight of the animal. Joe directs guards to the base of each opposing tree. The scout stays perched, while 3 hunters, including Joe, enter the darkness. The foliage thickens, creating a dense, narrow, dark passageway. The boys stay in a line, crouching down lower and lower until they are crawling closer and closer towards a deep, rumbling sound. Joe has considered turning back when he notices the ground beginning to slope downwards. As he feels his way, he moves through an opening. The space seems to expand. The boys have entered a cave. The darkness disorients the boys instantly. A deep, gurgling growl echoes off the walls. Sound returns from every direction. The boys have lost any sense of locality. The entrance disappears into the dark. They begin to feel around, an effort to anchor themselves with anything familiar. The dissociation from each other and their surroundings create a panic from within. Their fear of the beast is secondary to the emptiness of the dark. Joe struggles to belt out their rallying cry, "Caw! Caw!" No response comes from the other 2 boys. It takes 2 or 3 more tries to get Kenny to muster up enough courage to respond. "Caw! Caw!" he belts out. Unknown to Joe and Kenny, the 3rd hunter has collapsed to the ground and curled into a ball. He has succumbed to the fear and remains frozen amidst the confusion. Kenny's cries turn instantly into a distress call. He feels himself sinking into the ground. He starts yelling out, "Help! Help! Joe, help!" Kenny feels trapped. He anticipates the beast finding him and having his way with him. "Joe, I'm stuck! Joe, help! Man, help! I'm sinking!" screams Kenny. The beast increases its fury. The louder the boys yell. Kenny flails his arms in the air in a desperate attempt to find Joe or the other hunter. Even with all the commotion, Joe keeps his focus. He can't see the door, but he knows he couldn't have moved that far away from it. He doesn't want to take another step. He knows he can't help Kenny if he gets himself stuck. The day flashes through his memory in a flash of disbelief. He retraces his steps, remember Nathan's map of the hunt. "We had no warning of this event, none. I never should have trusted a kid who has never been on a hunt himself," he says to himself. The 2 trees were there, and the pool of blood. How could this happen? Why wasn't I warned to not go into the trees? Maybe I should have flushed it out with fire instead. Joe continues to question his decisions. Fire! Wait! Fire! Joe remembers his hatchet in his pack. He can't see anything, and to find something that would combust seemed impossible. He decides to squat on the ground and feels around for any sort of rock or hard surface. "Hold on, Kenny. How far have you sunk?" Joe belts out up over the growling noise. Crap. I'm about to my knees in this stuff, Joe," Kenny answers. Joe grabs his hatchet quickly out of his pack. He knows that if he loses his pack, there's a slim chance that he will ever find it again. So he's careful. He starts hacking away at the ground, thinking by chance he will hit a rock. He gets lucky with a few little sparks shooting into the air, spitting rocks here and there. Then he hits the edge of something just right, and fireworks shoot up high over his head and reveals, what the hell? Joe yells out and shuffles backward in the dirt, slamming his back and head up against the cave wall. Kenny reacts by jerking his arms, head, and back. He shouts to Joe, "What? What, Joe? Oh my gosh, Joe!" His sudden movements cause him to lose his balance, and his butt lands in the sinking ground. Joe tries to make sense of what he just saw and shuffles around to find his hatchet. His hands are shaking with fear, and even with his frantic movements, he is able to gather up the hatchet, and once again, he starts hacking away at the ground. This time, he swings at the ground with more purpose and intensity. Random sparks fly, first small and unrevealing, followed by multiple tiny lights filling the air. Then once again, he finds a large, firm surface and bangs away. His eyes are locked forward, unwilling to sacrifice any chance of exposing the scary vision. There, thinks Joe. "What the hell are you?" he questions in a frenzied effort to cast light on the shadowed image. Joe continues to wail on the surface, his eyes shifting right to left, not moving his head, challenging the darkness to expose himself. Joe feels the image's presence, but just to the right he sees the outline of the beast. Confused, he thrashes his hatchet harder and harder, faster and faster. The beast is behind something. He can't make sense of the scene, asking himself, "What is that? What is that?" The presence is larger than him, but still Joe can't make out any detail. The image moves closer and closer, but Joe continues to beat his hatchet against the rock. It is huge, and in a moment, just as the massive arm of darkness grasps Joe's body, he catches a glimpse of his face. Joe can barely catch his breath out of disbelief. Joe gets thrown up and out of the cave through the entrance. Ejected from the cave seconds later, he's joined by Kenny and the third hunter. The muck on Kenny smears all over the other boys' bodies. Their shock leaves the boys motionless. With focused eyes directed forward, the boys hold a trance of disbelief when clanging, squeaking, and banging noises came from the cave. The boys scramble around, head out through the tunnel. As the space opens, the boys go from a frantic call to a dead-on run, yelling, clicking, and screaming, hoping to get the other hunters' attention. Behind them is the beast, squealing and snorting and running straight towards them. Joe clicks and motions directions as they reach the opening between the two trees. The boys fan out to the right and left. The guards stand with bows cocked. The beast breaks into the light. The perched hunter pulls on a vine, which activates a spring action trap. Out of the ground pops up a deadly mass of arrows attached by vines on thick sticks. The beast goes head first into the virulent ambush. It tore through the structure, screeching from broken arrows embedded all over the front half of its body. As the boys see it break free, they shoot their bows at the beast's back half. The beast rears up, waving its head back and forth, twisting and flipping its body in the air, making great efforts to break free of the penetrating forces. Breaking out of the dark appears a tall, huge presence Joe had seen in the cave. He advanced past the two guards, shoving each of them out to the side. Without hesitation, the large being picks up the animal, gives it one vigorous yank of the head, and the beast falls limp in his arms. The boys bolt in fear, all except Joe. Joe's curiosity holds him in place. He stares in disbelief. Joe has seen Nathan's drawings of an adult human. Joe isn't sure if Nathan has memory of them after all, or if it's just his imagination. The image and the drawings were very vague. There was no real detail other than the image was a human male and very big. In person, the being's body seems out of proportion. His head, hands, and feet seem overly huge, even for his tremendous height. The being holds on to the beast, and then a deep, burly moan comes from within him. He gently sets the animal down, turns his head back in through the trees. Kenny yells at Joe, Hey, Joe, we need to get out of here before that thing comes back. I don't know. I don't think we have anything to worry about, Kenny, responds Joe. I think that beast was his pet. End of chapter 2.